Hi everyone, Diane here, welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to paint some aspen trees and we're going to do something a little bit like this because I am going to be following a tutorial by a gentleman who I shall introduce you to soon, whose name is Ronald Pratt. But first, a quick word about our sponsor for today's video, Craftsy. Like many people who enjoy art as a hobby, I also love other crafts. And that's why for me, Craftsy is an ideal fit. Craftsy is packed full of classes in over 20 popular categories, many of which I personally am not only interested in, but have enjoyed learning about. You can choose from subjects including everything from art to yoga, gardening, jewelry making, cake decorating, weaving, and of course cooking, and many more are all there for you to learn and create from. Craftsy instructors are all highly skilled experts in their fields, and the video lessons you'll find on Craftsy are professionally produced and easy and enjoyable to watch. Today, I've chosen to highlight a great creator and watercolor instructor with 20 years experience of teaching traditional landscape watercolor painting. His name is Ronald Pratt and he's from the San Francisco Bay Area in the United States. Ron has a very bold and colorful style, and in today's video, I'm going to attempt his tutorial for painting beautiful fall aspen trees in a loose way using masking fluid and sponges, among other things. Craftsy is the best online resource for all things creative, and if you're tempted by this offer, click on the link in the video description below to get a full year's membership for just $1.49. As well as the video lessons, Craftsy offers lives and a community where fellow makers can connect. So what's not to love about Craftsy? Click on the link below to explore what's on offer and join up to start your day the Craftsy way, just like me. So let's get started. I'm going to show you some of the things I've got here which I've got ready for doing this painting. Of course, first thing I've done is printed out the example of the painting as Ronald did it, and we're going to follow him as closely as possible in order to create my version of his idea of something that's been done lots of times. I've got another example here as well from some other artist called Moon, and that's interesting too. It's completely different from his, but it's a good subject for this time of year. So I'm going to go quickly through the special things that he uses in his tutorial. So we have here some natural sponges, some pieces, some large, some small pieces of natural sponge, which I keep in a basket to the side of my desk here. You'll need a mixing palette. One like this would be good. This is a Meaden one. They come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. Here's another one, the star daisy sized shaped one. Is that one, or you could use little dishes like this if you happen to have any. I find that a convenient way, or these little Pyrex dishes are quite good, or anything similar. If pushed, you can use just ordinary white saucers, out of your kitchen cupboard. I've got a sketchbook here for the first step in doing this painting, which is in the sketchbook. I'm going to use a Meaden block. This is 12 by 9 inches, cold press, 100% cotton watercolor paper. I think in his he uses arches. I'm going to use Michael Harding paints here because they are probably the most intense that I have. I've got two sets, one which was collated by myself, the other one which is there, I think this one, maybe they've got muddled up, the botanical set, which you can get from Amazon, which is quite nice, but I'm not going to lie to you, they're not cheap. But they are really good. But if you don't have those, it doesn't matter. You'll produce just as good a painting as I will using your Chinese paints or your Winsor & Newton or your Cotman or your Daniel Smith or whatever you happen to have. It's all the same. And the other thing that we're going to need is some masking fluid. I've got Winsor & Newton masking fluid here. There are lots of other sorts. Daniel Smith do one, Schminke do one. There's one by a company that sounds like an explosive device. What is it called again? Molotov, that's it. Molotov cocktail masking fluid. So you'll need that. And in order to successfully use the masking fluid, you need to pour some of it into a little dish. You need a brush that you don't mind sacrificing in case you can't recover it after it's had its experience of this. And you'll need a little dish which has got just a tiny drop of washing up liquid, as we call it in England, or dish soap, as they call it in America, or liquid hand soap, or any other kind of mild detergent. And I'll show you what I do with that later if you don't already know. So I'm going to put my paints out of the way for the minute. I've got a sketchbook here. Doesn't matter what sketchbook, doesn't matter whether it's just a piece of scratch paper from the printer, copy paper or whatever. And I just needed a piece of paper because, as I said, I'm going to be following his instructions. And his first instruction is to do a value sketch. So that's what we're going to do first. And he looked at a photograph to do his value sketch, and so will I. And what you do for a value sketch, you're going to be thinking about 3 values, 1, 2, and 3, which will be light, medium, and can you guess, dark? And every painting you do, if you're doing a landscape or a bouquet of flowers or anything, doesn't matter what, you should always think in terms of 3 main values, light, medium, and dark, because that way you get depth. So what I'm going to do is, this is going to be a thumbnail sketch, and this is my frame for the thumbnail sketch. And we're going to, first of all, think in terms of dividing it roughly into a sort of distant line, a horizon line here, which is about 1/3 of the way up the paper. That's a general good starting point. And then if you think in terms of 1/3 of the way across, either from the left or from the right, and where that 2 lines cross, that's your focal point sort of thing. And you're going to put your main tree probably somewhere around here. Don't put your main tree in the middle, and don't put it right on the edge, obviously. So we're going to just sketch in a nice tree. Don't make it too straight. I know these aspen trees tend to give you the impression that they are very straight, but they probably have a bit of a bend to them. And if they're going to be thicker at one end than the other, then make them thicker towards the bottom. Don't worry about shadow at this point. Okay, so this is our sort of horizon line, and we're kind of imagining a sort of path going through the forest like that. And this tree is right near the front. And so this is your foreground, and you're going to put some grasses and bits and pieces there. Then we'll have some trees going away into the distance, and to indicate that they're going into the distance, you're going to do them a little bit smaller, thinner. And so this one is in between this and this. So you've got a medium thick, you've got you could call it 3 bears, couldn't you? You've got daddy bear, mummy bear, and baby bear. Okay, and they're sitting on the ground. And then behind, I'm following his lead on this. Behind, he has here got a fir tree. So we'll sketch that in as a kind of rough triangle. Okay, something like that. And then on this side of the path, we're going to have about halfway up, we'll start a tree, another one, like that. Not quite as fat as that one, because it's a little bit further away, but not too thin either. And then we'll put one here. And remember, this is just a sketch. And then you might want to put another couple of thinner ones in there. So, and then here, what he's got is kind of bush there in the distance. And at the bottom of each of these trees, he's got some darks. And you can see as you shade in the dark there, your trees kind of jump out at you as you get your counterchange. That is to say, the dark behind the light of the trees, because these trees are going to be masked out. We're going to mask them out using masking fluid when we come to do the actual painting. Okay, so we have a little bit more shadow down here and some indication of grasses and bits and pieces. And we'll have grasses and stuff over here as well, and getting smaller as it goes into the distance. Okay, and then obviously these trees have little branches sticking out from them, hither and thither, and that's what makes them look like the tree they are. And they have little dark areas, don't they, on them where the bark has kind of peeled. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about that at this point because this is just a sketch. And I feel, I mean, he's got a big open space here, and I think probably when it comes to doing our painting, we'll probably put another tree or two in here, perhaps another pine tree there. Whoops, I shouldn't have done that bit. That's meant to be a bit of tree, not a bit of background. So just rub that out. I'm using a 4B pencil, which is easy to erase. Okay, so I would say I've got light and medium here, and I haven't got any darks. So if I'm going to put in some real darks, then I need to use the side of the pencil like that, and I'll come in with some darks for this dark pine tree in the background here. And for down here in front of this tree, we'll have a few quite dark darks, and between the trees. And Mr. Pratt says he thinks of this as making a kind of road map. So it gives him some guidance as he sets off on the painting. So I think that's quite a good way of looking at it. You've got the pathway going into the distance there. Now, when we come to doing this painting, we're going to mask out all the trees, and then we're going to drop in a wash over the whole thing. Then we're going to take off the masking fluid and paint the trees, and then we're going to finally paint the grasses and things in the foreground. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to leave that now. That is my thumbnail sketch for my own purposes. And I'm going to draw the painting now, draw the sketch on my paper, and then I'll come back and we can start painting together. Okay, so I have drawn out my sketch now here, and the next thing I need to do is to pour out, and I haven't used this in a while, so we have a little bit of a gunky mess at the top here in this bottle of masking fluid. So I'm just hoping that we're going to be able to use this stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to have to look for another bottle. Yeah, it does tend to dry out. It is a bit of a problem. But we just pull that out. This stuff used to smell terribly strongly of ammonia, but I think they've stopped putting the ammonia in it now. Whoops, that looks a little bit thin. I'll just put the lid back on and give it a bit of a shake. I'm going to pour that back in. And I'm going to, I think I might give it a stir. I'm going to use the end of my paintbrush. And it doesn't feel as if it's thickened up at all, so that's okay. And I'll just wipe off my brush using a tissue. Now, the reason for the dish soap, that's a bit thicker now, I've given it a shake. The reason for the dish soap, I'll put the lid back on that because otherwise it will dry up. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that this is not a completely, that it is a completely mess-free process using masking fluid. It does get everywhere, it gets all over your hands. This is why it's a good idea to have a dedicated area for painting, because it's bound to get into your dinner if you paint on the kitchen table. Anyway, so dish soap, yes. So take your brush, use an old cheap one, a cheap old one, or just an old one, or just a cheap one. This is a children's brush. I think it came free with some paints from Meaden or something, but it's not really a proper painting brush. So we just kind of smoosh that around in the soap. And the idea of that is to make it so that the this doesn't stick so much to the brush. It may or may not work. I'm not entirely sure that it helps a lot, but it's recommended. Lots of people do it. So then, having done that, we can dip into the masking fluid, and then we'll start to paint over our trees. And we'll probably do best to start from the left-hand side. And I noticed watching Ronald that he uses plenty of masking fluid in his masking out process. And in fact, what he does, apart from the fact that he takes a heck of a lot longer than I do to do his paintings, he's much more precise. I think he used to be a designer or an architect or something, so he's the kind of person that does things very precisely. I'm a little bit more, that'll do kind of thing. But anyway, so he for the big ones, I'll show you what he does. I don't have any handy, so I can't do the same thing. He paints along the outside edge of each tree and then fills in using a Q-tip, one of those cotton bud things. And I could do that. I used to have some here actually, but I think they rotted. They kind of fell to pieces. Anyway, I don't think I need to do that. I'm going to put the masking fluid on fairly thickly, the same as he does. But I'll just use the brush to do that. And this is not difficult. There's nothing tricky about it. There's no real secret to this. You just pick it up on the brush and smush it into your tree. The hardest part of this painting is probably the value study. And if you follow somebody else's tutorial, you don't need to worry too much about doing a value study because they've already done it for you. That's why, in case you're wondering, it never occurred to me for years after I started painting. That's why it's so much easier to copy somebody else's work, because they've already done the difficult part. That is to say, the values have been worked out and the composition has been worked out. And you look at it and you say, oh, that looks nice. I'll do that. And then you try to invent one of your own and it doesn't work. And you think, what's the matter with me? Why can't I do that? This one's quite thin. I used to think that. I still do sometimes. I know I need, inspiration to be able to paint. I can't just do it out of my head. I need a photograph or I need the real thing. And that's one of the reasons I sort of shy away from landscapes a bit, because they are more difficult. There's no doubt about that. I'm just going to move that over there a little bit so I don't put my hand in the masking fluid. As you have noticed, I've dripped a little bit there, but that doesn't matter because we'll come to that in a minute. It does still smell a little bit, so if you're very sensitive to aromas, you might want to look for one that doesn't have any kind of smell. I think that the smell of the masking fluid is kind of proportional to its efficiency. So if you get one without any smell, you'll probably find it doesn't work quite so well. Some people say they can't get the thing off after they've done it, but a couple of things come to mind. Although you need to wait for it to dry completely before you take the masking fluid off, it needs to be completely dry, and so does the paint that you put over the top of it. Don't leave it for weeks or even months like some people do. I have been known to forget all about a painting and come back to it a lot later and find that the masking fluid wouldn't come off. And that's because it has bonded really with the paper underneath, which will happen in time. And also, if you use a hairdryer to speed up the process, which with some masking fluids you can do, it will say on the bottle. I think that he told me, I was watching this video, there's one, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll check it out and I'll put it in the description below. There's this particular one must be a new formulation, and you can use a hairdryer on it. I don't know that I would use a hairdryer on the Winsor & Newton one that I've got. I don't know. I mean, you probably can, but after having spent 20 minutes putting the masking fluid on the paper, you might not want to risk it. So anyway, not advised to use hairdryer to dry your masking fluid, just in case it glues it to the paper. But, you know, there's no rules in watercolor. And when people say, oh, you know, there's no rules, and then they go ahead and say, yeah, but you mustn't do this and you mustn't do that. Well, that's kind of a bit contradictory, isn't it? Anyway, but you can always give it a try and it might work for you. And of course, it's also going to depend on the paper that you've got. If you've got cheap paper that's not very well sized, you know, hasn't got sizing in it properly, then you might find that the masking fluid would rip the paper. And people sometimes complain about that to me and they say, it ripped my paper. And I'm like, yeah, but that's actually not something I can do much about. Anyway, so there we are. And then that's all the trees. So I'm going to put also a bit of masking. This is what he suggested in the foreground here, because we're going to use a technique which I learnt with Hugh Brading from New Zealand a long time ago, when he taught me how to do beautiful loose backgrounds for florals. And I've got one hanging on my wall here. I've got a photocopy of it. I haven't got the actual one. I sold it, which was a shame because I sold all the good work I did with him. I don't know why I did that. I should have kept it, but didn't. Okay, so we'll just put some, this is where the path's going into the distance. And I don't know whether that's a good idea or not, because we're going to put light colours in the background in a minute. So there we are. And the next thing to do, oh, actually, I forgot. We need some thinner ones, which are just ones I didn't draw in. And just put a couple of thin ones in here. And maybe a few vertical lines here, sort of a little bit broken up. I haven't really got enough room to put much. That'll have to do. And you can always, when you've done this, you can always, when you've done the painting, I mean, you can always add lights using white gouache, can't you? So I was going to say, the thing to do next is not to forget to wash out your brush. So you're going to get rid of the masking fluid that's on that brush. And with any luck, I think it's probably worked actually. With any luck, the soap has prevented the masking fluid from bonding to the hairs on your brush. So I think we're okay there. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second and let this dry. And then in the meantime, we will mix up our paints. I'll put that over there. Like I said, you could use this palette or this palette to do your paint mixing, or you could use little dishes. I'm still trying to make my mind up, actually. But what I am going to do also, before I forget, I'm going to tip the remainder of that back into the bottle. That will dry in there, and then you'll be able to peel it out like this. Okay, so I'll go over there. Colours I'm going to use as the first thing to talk about, isn't it? Now, looking at the example that I'm following with Ron, he uses a nice bright yellow in the middle of his painting. And for that, I think I'm going to use this palette because it's got bigger spaces in it than this one. So I'll use this. And these would be good too. That was what I was really tossing up between. So how many colours do I actually need? How many have I got here? I've got 2, 4, 6, 8. I think I'll use this. I like this palette. I like the shape of it because it's a little bit different. I'm going to use benzimidazolone. I've learnt that word now, otherwise known as azo yellow. Azo yellow is going to be my basic yellow for the background. So we're going to squeeze a little bit of that in there. And I'll close that up. Then we're going to use, along with that, we're going to use quinacridone gold, of course. We can't do a painting without quin gold in it, can we? So that's going to go there. And then we're going to use orange, azo orange, benzimidazolone orange. I'm showing off now. And that can go in here. And then we need a red. So we'll use quinacridone red. That can go in there. All these synthetic colours are totally not made from anything natural. They're all chemicals, probably byproducts of the chemical industry in China. And let me see, so we need green as well. I think we'll go with moss green. That seems like a quite likely sort of colour for what we're doing. I should wipe the necks of my tubes to keep them clean, but I'm not. So there we are. And I'm going to go for perylene green, which is very dark green, and that will be lovely for the fir trees in the distance, I hope. And let me see, what else is there? Looking over here, I wonder whether we want some burnt sienna. We might want some burnt sienna. We might want a bright green, but we can make our own. I don't know. I think I'll start off with this and see how this goes. Yeah, I think we'll keep it to a limited palette. We could add more colours, but the problem with doing that, of course, is that then you have the danger of things getting messy. So now I'm going to mix these up somewhat into washes, because the way we're going to do the background to this painting is to use these colours as washes. So we'll take a brush and some clean water, and you can do it in more than one way actually. You might choose to just spray the water on from a spray bottle like that, or you could use a dropper and squirt the water on from a little dropper, medicine dropper type of thing. Or you can pick up the water on your brush and just drip it in. All of these things are possible. But if you spray some water on like this, you can see what colour you have there. That almost looks like a blue when it hits water, doesn't it? So we can soften this paint up and make it into a nice wash. The whole thing. So we have a nice strong yellow wash there. And we can get most of the paint off the brush by just mushing it against the side there. And then I always wipe it on a towel and rinse it off. Then into the clean water and go to the next colour. And if you don't use all the paint in this painting, which we won't, it doesn't matter. You don't have to throw it away. Just keep it and use it in the next painting. Just keep it. And a little tiny bit of waste is not the end of the world, is it? And we'll mix up the quinacridone red. This is not my normal method. I don't usually paint like this, but an awful lot of people do. And it's a good method. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to add a little bit more water to that because that's quite strong. And like I say, you know, we're watering the paint down, but if we don't use it all, it doesn't matter. We can always come back to it. Once it's dry, we can just reactivate it by adding water again. It's absolutely not a problem. Moss green. So we've got moss green, perylene green, quinacridone gold, azo yellow, azo orange, and quinacridone red. Those are the colours that we're going to start with. And I think that's a pretty good palette for this kind of a painting. We should be okay with that. I'll just smoosh the paint off the brush at the side there. He uses his fingers and squeezes it out, but he's a man. And I'm sure most ladies don't want to do that. This is the perylene green, which is almost black. If you mix this perylene green with something like this red, you'll get a colour which is extremely dark and resembles Payne's grey. And you could use that for your dark bits on these trees, because that's the characteristic of these trees, isn't it? That they have those bark stripes. So you could use that, or you can just use Payne's grey. Okay, so I'm going to stop the camera there. I'm going to go and clean my water, and I'm going to come back and start the next part of the painting. Okay, so my masked off areas are completely dry now. And what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to wet the whole area of the painting. Ron suggests using a sponge with which to do that. So we could do that. I have some some natural sponges actually, not synthetic ones here. So I'm just going to, it just saves time actually, especially if you're doing a big painting. But you could just as easily use a brush to do this. There's no particular benefit to doing it with a sponge. But you just want to make sure that you do cover the whole thing, because you're going to be putting in a wash over the whole, a wet in wet wash basically. So if you pick it up and sort of move it from side to side, you'll see areas where the water is soaked up more quickly sometimes, which is because of a certain amount of variation in the sizing, I think, of the paper, or where you might have missed it. So you just kind of make sure you've got the whole thing wet. It's easy to miss bits. So then we are going to start with yellow, and we'll pick up some yellow. And in his original painting, there's plenty of yellow all over the middle of the painting. So we're just dropping that in, and I'm not really even working it in. I'm just letting it fall into the wet paper. So we'll put that there, and he suggests coming into the foreground a bit with some yellow there. And I'll just point out that I had taken off the masking that I'd put in the foreground because that wasn't correct. So I took that off. Once it was dry, I realized what I'd done. I was confusing paint with masking fluid. So we'll start off like that, and then I'm going to come in with some quinacridone gold. And I'm using a large size 12 round brush here. It could be any make. This one happens to be a Craftsy, but I quite like Princeton. And then there's my Drawwells as well, which I get from Japan. And all the things that I use I mention in the description below. And I've got links there to our Amazon shop, and you can get all of the things that I use pretty much, more or less, are available on there. So I'm just dropping the quinacridone gold in, and have a fair amount of it down the bottom here, I think. But don't cover up all of your yellow by any means. You don't want to do that. And then the next colour that you're going to think about, I'll just put a little bit more orange there. Quinacridone, it's not actual orange. We'll pick up a little bit of orange, but I'm not going to use much of the orange at this point because I want to put most of that in using the sponge later. That's what we're going to be doing. Yeah, so we'll just put that in down here. So maybe a little bit. Keep that kind of loose. And then we might need to put some green in. And I did actually add another color while you weren't looking, which is, this is light sap green. No, sorry, it's not. It isn't. It is bright green lake. But it looks a lot like, whoops, I'm painting over a tree there. It looks a lot like sap green. So we'll pop some of that in here and there. Pretend that there are some green trees in the distance. Not too much. Don't want too much green because this is an autumn picture. Put a little bit down here in the foreground. A little bit here. Just lightening that a little bit. Okay, so now that's our basic background wash done. You can see. And so what we have to do now is basically wait for it to dry. And this is a case where I think it's probably best not to dry it off with a hairdryer, again, because we've got the masking fluid on, so you really don't want to do that. Okay. So just putting in a little bit more where I've got some actual gaps. Oh yes, and I think it seems to soak in quite a bit, and I don't want to lose that yellow up top here, so I'll just add a little bit more of that. I might put a bit more quinacridone actually, I think, here. And I might put my paper on a slight angle like that so that you can't really see, but it will start to kind of flow down a little bit if I put it on a bit of an angle. And I'll leave that for the minute and come back when it's dry. Okay, so I'm going to diverge a little bit from Ron, and because he starts doing his stamping with the sponge into wet to the wet paint, but I don't want to do that. I want to do my sponge stamping on dry paper. So just to show you how I'm going to do that, I'll just get that out of the way a minute. I've got a piece of sponge here, and it's really, you know, some sponges are very coarse like this, some are very much finer like that, and you'll often be find yourself in possession of a big one like this. If you buy some sponge, don't be afraid to rip a piece off. It's not as hard as it looks. Just tear a piece off like that, and then have a look at the shape of the sponge itself and decide if you can come up with a kind of pattern that's going to look good when you stamp with it. So I don't use my sponge wet. Some people do, but I prefer not to. So I would just go into the color and then just dab it on like that and use different colors to create leaves like this. This one's going to be really dark, so we won't do too much of that. But if you mix the dark into the light, you will get quite a realistic sort of tree design. Okay, so we can pick up some more orange And, you know, you can make a lovely mess. That's okay. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to see if we can make a lovely mess. And we're going to start off with this piece of sponge here, and I'm going to pick up some quinacridone gold. And you do need a test sheet so that you can try it out. Make sure you don't go like that, because he calls that the wallpaper effect. You have to keep turning your wrist so that you get an irregular pattern. Okay, so let's start with some of that. We'll go in over the top up here. I'm thinking I could probably use some what's it called? I said I might want some burnt sienna. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to add that to my palette. We weren't sure, were we, at the beginning, whether we were going to need that or not. This is not the sort of painting that you do when you're just about to go out for the evening and you want your nails to look good. You can also do it like that. You can put the paint directly onto the sponge using a brush as well. Yeah, so we'll do that. And you can add, I think that's actually not a bad way of doing it, because I was thinking putting some green on in various places. And you can be a bit more kind of controlled that way. So we might want to sort of put some bushes here and maybe down here. And we might want to come back to this. I'm going to put just a tiny couple of bits of the dark green. That's going to make a good fir tree. There we are. You don't want it everywhere. Not by any means. You don't want it everywhere, but just a few places. So I think that's probably enough of that for now. And then what we're going to do now is go back to our brush, and we're going to put some sort of dark, that is an incredibly dark green. Look at that. I need another palette. Always have more palettes handy than you think you're going to need, because you will. So I'm going to put some dark reddish brown. That is to say, this is burnt sienna with a tiny bit of dark green in it. And we're going to just put some darks in behind the tree line here at the bottom. And then we might go for a bit of darker green above that. Don't think about trees, think about colour, you know. It's because you're always, when you're painting, you're always doing a pattern. I'm going to leave this light here because I want to put some dark grasses on there later. And I think I'm going to put a little bit of orangey brown here. And maybe here. And then I'm going to put the dark tree in here. So I'm going to sit down for that because that's going to be interesting. So let's put in a vertical for the trunk, and then we'll just go dancing with the point of our brush from side to side. And we want the perylene green mixed with moss green, I think is probably reasonable. And you just want to go dancing. And it's going to go behind this tree because this, remember, is masked out. And let's have a little bit of something a little bit lighter down here, just because maybe the sun is catching on the side of this tree here. So all the way down there like that. And then we could put another one over here. I start at the top. That will give a sense of distance because it's behind, and we won't see that until we get rid of the masking fluid. Okay, so we leave that like that. And we will want to definitely darken down the bottoms of these trees. But I want to do that in a minute once we've got rid. Well, actually, no, it's a good idea to do a bit of it now, because we've got the masking fluid and we can just go right up against the trunks, and that gives a good effect. Just emphasize some areas. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for that to dry a little bit. So now we are, I think, probably pretty much dry, and it's time to take the mask off of the trees. And I'm not going to subject you to the whole process, but I will get it started, and then I'll come back once I've got the masking off. I'm one of those people that tends to be a bit more hands-on than others. You can buy special tools to lift your mask off. But I personally tend to try to do it with my thumb. So I'm just rolling this, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to take hold of it at some point when I've got far enough up the tree trunk. And I don't want to smudge it and make it too dirty, because, you know, it's easy if the paint is still damp to make your trees mucky. And anyway, so it's not a simple thing. It does take a while. It's one of the reasons I don't do much masking. It helps if your hands are clean and if the paint is completely dry. So that's the ideal. And some people use an eraser, or you can use there's a special tool made from some kind of plastic. You can use that too, or it has been known to be possible to use a piece of masking fluid itself, but I'm not sure that that's going to work here. No, I don't think so. So anyway, I will persevere with this, and I shall be back in the relatively near future with my trees exposed to the light of day. You can see how it's going to start looking, can't you? Right, so I've got all the masking fluid off now, so we can see the trunks of the trees reasonably clearly. And the next step is really basically going to be to put some shadow onto the trunks to give them a bit of shape. Now, it's possible you might think that the best colour to use would be grey, and you could if you want to, but I want to reserve the grey for the markings on the trees. And for the shadows, I think we're going to start off with the complement to the yellow-orange background that we've painted, which is a little bit of quinacridone rose mixed with a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm just using a Cotman, I think it's Cotman ultramarine blue here. Could be anything. And we're just going to mix that up to get a violet shade, or you could use a pre-mixed violet, but we're going to make it nice and watery because it's only just as a sort of little hint of shadow on these trees. And what we'll do is we'll just put some shadow down one side. I've just got a test piece here, sort of like one side of the tree, pale like that. I think maybe we could make it a little bit bluer, but it's up to you really, but just keep it nice and light. I think I'm going to put that, some of that in there. I'm going to pick up a bit more blue and some more water. So let's we can start with the one on the far left, and we're just going to, because you know these things aren't completely flat, are they? So the shadow's going to be a bit higgledy-piggledy, so we'll just kind of give it a curve like that. And that's just a starting point. So just go about halfway over. And imagine the light is coming from the back sort of thing. This could be the first layer. You can always come in with a second if you want to make it darker. You might want to do 2 layers, especially near the bottom. So we'll wait for it to dry the first time. Pretty much random, really. And we're going to put some more branches on in a minute and some more leaves. So the details of this aren't crucial. Just basically the shadows of the branches of the other trees are kind of falling onto these trees. And obviously nearer the bottom, there's more shadowy because it's at the bottom. I don't know if that's dry enough yet to put another. No, that's just going to run. So we have to wait for that to dry before we can put the second layer of shadow on there. I get the hairdryer. Okay, so we'll just mix up a little bit more of the blue and the pink, which is incredibly strong. Too strong, in fact. Let's go to this little palette here. And we'll just put some darker patches here and there, especially near the bottom of the trees, where they'll be in more shadow, I suppose. And the violet, or the mauvey grey, makes a nice complement to the orange. And then we'll mix up something more like Payne's grey. Perhaps we'll even use Payne's grey for the sake of argument for the markings on the trunks. We could use this dark green, but I think I'll probably make it easy for us all by finding some Payne's grey. This is a Dale Rowney. We could add a tiny bit of burnt sienna to it to just make it a little bit softer if we wanted to. So that's Payne's grey. Or I suppose you could add a touch of green. So this part of the painting is the sort of thing you don't want to rush. Because I'm standing down looking up at the tree, if anything, these lines should curve slightly that way, like that. It's the kind of thing you have to take your time over. This is where your mind tends to wander. And listening to good music is probably a good idea at this point, rather than waiting for me to say something earth-shattering. You can see what I'm doing, just basically indicating some of the lines. You won't want to put all of them in because we know that they have quite a few, don't they, these trees? It might be easiest to start at the top, but that's kind of up to you. It's kind of meditative process, really. Trying to think of different things to do, different ways of indicating the torn bark. And we could darken shadows at the bottom here while we're at it. And then just for change, and then go back to the I suppose as you go further away and they're more in the distance, you might make the markings less distinct. You want a brush that has a good point, like this one, to be able to do this properly. Okay, and that's tree trunk number 2. If you felt like it, you could, just to give yourself a bit of a break, you could pop in a few of your grasses down here. How much grass you put in around the base of these trees is entirely up to you. But it looks good when it comes over, dark lines coming over and from behind the tree, like that. I think I'll probably use my sword liner for some of those lines later on when we get there. Right, so then we've got this little one here. I think I might leave that one to the end, and I'm thinking about putting in a branch up here. Should we? We could have one coming out here, going behind. Ah, dear, right. Try to think of something to say here. because this is all pretty much the same, isn't it? Not terribly exciting stuff. So we'll put in a branch like that, and then maybe we'll put another one up here. And then some more of our lines. We don't have trees like this around here very much, although I have seen them in England, obviously. Around here I don't, and obviously when we lived in Canada, we saw them often. Once you've put the bark lines in, you can come back with some more shadows on the tree trunks if you want, if you feel you need to. Put some branches in behind. And we're going to, where we've got some spaces here, we're going to put in more leaves as well. So these are the details that take a little bit of concentration, because obviously it's this kind of part of the design that makes the tree look like the kind of tree it is, really. Quite fun putting these branches in. A bit like painting a Dalmatian dog, really. So just to remind you, we are using Payne's Grey and a little touch of burnt sienna for this part. I'm not going to put many on this one, but I am going to put a bit more shadow on that one in a minute. Okay. We need to let that dry a bit, and I'm going to add a little bit more sponging. Let me see. I think we might use this one, which is a bit more crusty, a bit more sort of rough. And we need to pick up some more orange. And of course, the paint has been drying while it's been sitting in its little pans. So I have to reactivate that. And we'll need our test sheet. I'll pick up a bit more orange. Just to give another dimension, just go over with some of these orange leaves. And I think we probably want some yellow. Yeah. You could go completely bonkers with this and do far too much. So we don't want to do that, but I'm going to do a few down here and a couple over here. I think we're probably getting quite close to enough. Let us go for some shadowy colour again. A little bit of brown with that. You could carry on adding and adding and adding to this if you wanted to, especially with the branches. You know, I think it's one of those things that you could really spend quite a lot of time thinking about where you want to put the branches, altering them, and so on. You can always use white on a painting like this too, to alter things a bit. I'm going to add some green to that, and I'm going to, I think, use my other brush. Like I said, I'm going to take my sword liner, which is this one, and just do a few flicky greens in the foreground. And I think we're getting close to the end of what I want to be doing with this one for today. So I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to click on the link below and discover what you can about Craftsy and their offerings for $1, whatever it is. You click on the link below and find out whether it's something that might work for you. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you like this, if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, and that would be much appreciated. And I'm going to try a little bit of green spatter at the bottom here to indicate leaves, and a little bit of quinacridone gold, what's left of it. It's almost all gone. We go for some orange and yellow then. It's surprising actually how much paint I did use. Oh, and I did want to just bring this tree down a bit further because that looks a bit weird the way that stopped there. Like I say, you keep looking, the more you look, the more you see. And this was meant to be a bit of a bush here in the background. And this was meant to, I forgot about this bit here. Undergrowth and all that kind of thing. So there we are. I think that's it. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I'll see you again soon. And have a lovely day, what's left of it from your point of view. And yeah, have a go. It's actually by no means as hard as it looks. Really, it isn't. As you can see, it's done. Bye for now, everybody. Bye-bye. Well, I think I have to stop now because I think it's lunchtime. And probably of your time taken up. Let me know in the comments below what you think of that, and I'll look forward to reading your comments as usual. And don't forget to like and subscribe and visit us on Patreon. I'm not going to say anything else because apparently everybody will have gone by now. So if you're still there, happy painting, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now, everybody. Bye-bye. Right, I'm done.